you to Antoine C. Wright. What did you think of your first time here?
I think this couch has my name on it, and I appreciate bojangling around with the girls today.
I love it. I love it. We are back here at noon tomorrow. For now, here's Harris.
Fox News alert, Michael Cohen pleading guilty to a new criminal charge today in the Mueller investigation as President Trump is now ripping into his former longtime attorney and confidant. This is Outnumbered Overtime. I'm Harris Faulkner. Today's big stunner, Michael Cohen pleading guilty in a Manhattan federal court to lying to Congress. The former personal attorney to the president admitted he made false statements to lawmakers about a plan to build a Trump Tower in Moscow. Cohen's plea, his second in the past 4 months, comes as part of a new deal with special counsel Robert Mueller and the investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. President Trump went after Cohen before leaving for the G20.
He was convicted of various things unrelated to us. He was given a fairly long jail sentence, and he's a weak person. And by being weak, unlike other people that you watch, he's a weak person, and what he's trying to do is get a reduced sentence. So he's lying about a project that everybody knew about. I decided ultimately not to do it. There would have been nothing wrong if I did do it.
Meanwhile, we are learning more about the president's written answers to the special counsel as he continues to hammer out an investigation that has hung over his presidency for some 18 months. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge with the news from Washington. Catherine?
Well, thank you, Harris, and good afternoon. This draft prepared by Cohen's attorneys for Congress in 2017 is at the heart of Cohen's guilty plea this morning about this Moscow real estate proposal that never went through. As Cohen left a New York court this morning, he did not stop to take reporters' questions about the apparent conflict. In the draft for Congress in 2017, Cohen said negotiations over the Trump-Moscow project ended in January of 2016. But he told a New York court today it was, in fact, 5 months later in June of 2016. In the draft, Cohen said the discussion about traveling to Moscow was limited and it was never raised with then-candidate Trump. But Cohen told a New York court the discussions were, in fact, more extensive. On Capitol Hill a short time ago, the chairman and the ranking member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, that committee matters because they got the testimony from Cohen in the first place, reacted to the plea.
I'm not going to comment upon the commentary that this individual made before our committee. We've kept that confidential, but obviously Mr. Cohen was one of the witnesses that we've always wanted to have come back, and that need goes up.
I haven't seen the specific indictment or the plea, but this is a reason people shouldn't lie when they're in front of a congressional investigation.
Before the Cohen story broke this morning, the president renewed his criticism of the Robert Mueller probe, tweeting, "When will this illegal Joseph McCarthy-style witch hunt, one that has shattered so many innocent lives, ever end? Or will it just go on forever?" After wasting more than $40 million, it has proven only one thing. There was no collusion with Russia. So ridiculous. And we're also learning today more about the president's written answers to Mueller. They were submitted just within the last couple of weeks. Sources tell Fox News that the president said he did not know about the 2016 Trump Tower meeting in advance, that Roger Stone did not tell him about any contact with WikiLeaks, and that he was also not aware of the RNC platform change regarding the Ukraine. So that's a lot to unpack, but that's where we stand on this very busy news day, Harris.
Before I let you go, because this is something I didn't get to ask you last hour, how do we know all this information? I mean, when you talk about a leak, do we know how?
A leak, sorry, with
the questions and the, I mean, are we learning just that in kind of context, or do we actually know what's being asked?
Okay, so we know that the submitted questions from the special counsel dealt with the issues surrounding allegations of Russian collusion. They did not deal with what I'll call obstruction of justice, which would be, some argue, the firing of the FBI Director James Comey. What's happened really in the last 72 hours is that there have been a series of leaks about the substance of the president's written answers to the special counsel. CNN got that story first. We were able to corroborate some of that reporting. And in the last few minutes, I've spoken with a source close to the legal team, And I asked whether the Cohen plea today has any impact on the written responses provided by the president, and I was told that the legal team remains confident with the written answers that were provided. So it doesn't change their calculus at this point.
Oh, thank you for digging deeper on that. Catherine
You're
Marriage
welcome.
and spelling it out for us. Good to see you.
Sure.
Let's bring in now Republican Lee Zeldin of New York. I kind of felt like you deposing her there. The congressman sits on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, maybe even asking some of the questions that you might ask, Congressman. Thank you for being with me. What does this tell us about the Mueller investigation?
Well, for one, the president, who has personal knowledge that he didn't do anything wrong, he continues to cooperate. He's answering questions. A lot of documents have been provided. This investigation appears to be going well beyond, with this ever-expanding scope that is a lot further than the purpose for creating and appointing the special counsel in the first place. The president is ready for this investigation to end, but what's more important than that is our country is ready for it to end. So the Mueller investigation hopefully is one that will be winding down soon, because it really is improper for there to be an investigation like this throughout the entire time that President Trump is in office. I, as a member of Congress, I'm serving this is the end of my 4th year now. I'm not aware of any evidence whatsoever that the president had colluded with the Russians. So until we come in contact with any information whatsoever, the justification for not only continuing this investigation, but also expanding the probe, like what we're seeing, well beyond of why it was created in the first place. We have a lot of members of Congress who have a problem with that too.
All right, Michael Cohen, were you surprised at all about the entry of a guilty plea, if you will, that he put in this morning, lying to Congress?
Well, what strikes me about it is that Mueller's star witness has now admitted to being a liar criminally. And I'm a former prosecutor, and looking for facts and elements of a crime, I see so much that is missing about what gets alleged maybe in the news, or those who want to take down the president, who are desperate, who are praying to take down the president and his family. There's so much that is missing here, and now you have a star witness who has less credibility than he did yesterday, and an investigation that has less credibility than it did yesterday. And it seems like one indictment and guilty plea after another of what we're seeing it is getting away from the heart of why this special counsel was created in the first place, and that was for there to be accountability and transparency with regards to whether or not the Russians interfered with the 2016 election. And so much of the crimes that get pursued are completely unrelated to the Trump campaign, and a lot of what is taking down these individuals, like what we're seeing today with Michael Cohen, is with regards to lying. And by the way, regardless of whether it's this case or any other case, and you just had Senator Kennedy share his thoughts in the last segment, is whether you're talking to Congress, you're talking to the Department of Justice, it's really important to be honest, because if you lie, you're going to get in trouble for it.
Yeah, I spoke with Senator Kennedy last night on the story, and that's exactly what he was saying. Real quickly before I let you go, how do you make a deal with what you call a criminal liar? I mean, he's striking yet another deal. And is it significant that he's doing it in your state of New York or in any state?
Well, with regards to that piece, geography and jurisdiction, is that you don't need a special counsel to be going after so much of what it appears Bob Mueller is looking into now. The Department of Justice can handle that on its own. And also, why, with Jeff Sessions, he's left the Department of Justice. The reason why this was created really started with, it stemmed from a recusal made by Jeff Sessions as the Attorney General. So now let's get back to normalcy within the Justice Department. Let's have an Attorney General who's in charge of the DOJ, because to your point on jurisdiction and geography, and this happening in New York, this really can be happening all under the normal chain of command of the Department of Justice, as opposed to making the special counsel even bigger than it was before.
Does Michael Cohen lessen the years in prison that he might have to spend by doing this deal making?
Probably. I mean, that's probably the whole motive for doing it in the first place, is to be able to get favorable treatment. And there's a lot that Michael Cohen has gotten in trouble with that's completely unrelated to President Trump, This was Michael Cohen's own actions, and he might be, it looks like he's cutting a deal to get favorable treatment for himself, even if that might be harming a president of the United States. It might be embarrassing our justice system. It's Michael Cohen doing what's best for Michael Cohen, regardless of the consequences. That's unfortunate.
Yeah. I don't know. I had not heard anybody put it the way you did, criminal liar. How do you trust that person? How do you cut a deal with somebody like that?
No credibility.
Congressman, thank you so very much. Congressman Lee Zeldin of New York. Good to see you.
Thank you, Harris.
Let's go deeper legally now. Tom Dupree, who served as Deputy Assistant Attorney General under President George W. Bush. Tom, always good to have you on the program. I hope you were able to hear or watch my conversation just then with Congressman Zeldin. I want to get your reaction to it.
Yes, absolutely. And look, I think the congressman made a lot of very good points. And Harris, as to your question about how do you cut a deal with a criminal liar, it's a fair point, because if the idea is that at some point, someday, Bob Mueller might call Michael Cohen as a witness or rely on him for testimony or for building a case against the president, that is something that he's going to have to deal with. That this is a guy who you have indicted for making false statements to Congress, and at the same time, you're now holding him up as a model of probity or as someone whose word can be taken at face value. I will say this, though, that this is very common in prosecutorial world, right, is that you cut a deal with someone like Michael Cohen and you get him to admit to lying, but then on the other hand, you say, but we want you to believe the rest of what he's saying. So it's common ground for prosecutors, but it is an interesting twist to all of this.
Yeah, you know, I just kind of harken back to my debate days in college, and whenever anybody tried to posture a win in a debate with a liar's lair, I knew they had lost. Because when you have somebody standing up that doesn't tell the truth, but they're a really good storyteller, yeah, right. I got you on that.
Right, right.
So, President Trump says that he has not yet offered his former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, a pardon. It's not off the table. This has been much discussed. And now that we know that Paul Manafort breached his deal, according to Mueller, by lying, or at the very least resisted to adhere to any sort of a narrative, what does that tell us about the pardon status going forward?
Well, this has been just a constantly changing saga, Harris, like from day to day. And I think the latest developments, what they tell me is that Manafort is still doing his best to remain in the good graces of the president and the White House. No doubt, at least with an eye toward a possible pardon down the road. The thing that really jumped out at me from the news developments of the last few days is the fact that Manafort's team has been keeping the president's legal team looped in as to the questions that Mueller has been asking him and the evidence that Mueller has disclosed to Manafort in the course of his questioning Manafort. That, to me, says it is very important from Paul Manafort's perspective to maintain a good relationship with this president, with the White House. And the only explanation I can find for what is a very unusual development is that he wants to at least keep the possibility of a pardon in play.
Tom, is the world just filled with liars when they talk to the FBI? I mean, why does the constant stream seem to be dishonesty? And that's not even really evidence, by the way. That's not like they went to a crime scene and captured some evidence.
Yeah, you know, Harris, it's fascinating. I mean, I suppose it raises deeper questions of human nature, but the thing that always jumps out at me in these types of investigations is so often the thing that catches people is their lies under oath, their lies to prosecutors, their lies to Congress.
Are they just nervous? Can it happen to any of us?
Well, I wouldn't go so far as to say it could happen to any of us, but I will say that...
It just seems so common.
For anyone who goes and interacts with the Justice Department or Congress, you just have to be so scrupulous and so careful, because that's where things often go awry, is that people will be telling a story and maybe it's an intentional lie, maybe it's just a failure to remember something, maybe it's inadvertent, but the consequences can be so very severe.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to get to is that kind of the modus operandi when you're investigating like this, rather than just looking for the sheer evidence if you can't find it. And maybe that's another reason why attorneys would tell the president not to sit down, because this happens so very often.
Yeah, I think that has got to be something that at least is on the mind of the lawyers in the White House, that any time you put the president or, frankly, any client in the position where they're testifying under oath, there is always that danger lurking out there. Obviously, it's one thing if the witness is intentionally lying, but it's quite another thing if, as I said a minute ago, it's an honest failure to recall something or a failure to fully disclose something. You can get in a lot of hot water that way, so you have to be very, very careful and make sure your witness is very well prepared.
One last one to hit you with. Alan Dershowitz, somebody that I'm sure you're familiar with, being the legal guru that you are, so I would imagine maybe you guys even talk to each other as legal experts, recently said that the president should be very worried about what Mueller has. And he didn't say criminally, but he said There's a stack of evidence there, I'm paraphrasing him now, that he should worry about. What is it?
Well, let's see. I mean, the first thing is like only the president knows exactly whether he should be worried, and he has been very firm.
Well,
that
he said
has nothing to
politically,
worry about.
Dershowitz.
Right. And I think from Dershowitz's perspective, and I think there's some truth to this, that, look, Bob Mueller has been out conducting this investigation for a long time. He has talked to a lot of people, and as we know, he has gotten the cooperation of people who are very close to the president. Now, is there going to be information that is in some sense politically damaging to the president that is going to come out at the end of the day? My guess is probably yes. But for me, at least, the big question is whether it crosses the line to establish some sort of criminal wrongdoing on the part of the president or those close to him. I think that is the big question. Politically damaging, yes. What are the legal consequences? I would say to be determined.
All right. Tom Dupree, thank you very much. See you next time.
Thanks, Harris.
Continuing coverage now of former Trump attorney Michael Cohen's guilty plea with live reaction from lawmakers on both sides of the political aisle. Along with the power panel this hour. Plus, President Trump abruptly canceled his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin while traveling to the G20 summit. Details. Stay close. Story is now developing. In the last few seconds, President Trump abruptly canceled his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin while traveling to the G20 summit to Argentina, pointing to escalating tensions between Russia and Ukraine. Kevin Corke is live in Buenos Aires, Argentina, with the latest. And so now we know the response from Russia. Kevin?
That we do. Just to give you a bit of background there, Harris, the president conferred with the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, as well as his national security advisor, also his chief of staff, who is a former general. And the president made it clear and made that decision aboard Air Force One to simply scrub this meeting, at least for the time being. That's what we can tell you. I can always tell you this, too. We kind of felt like coming into this summit that this was certainly a possibility, given Russia's aggressive behavior over and with respect to Ukraine. First, let me take you to Twitter and share just a bit what the president had to say about this. Of course, following that decision made aboard Air Force One, it said this on Twitter: based on the fact that the ships and sailors have not been returned to Ukraine from Russia, I've decided it would be best for all parties concerned to cancel my previously scheduled meeting in Argentina with President Vladimir Putin. I look forward to a meaningful summit again as soon as this situation is resolved. As you see there, he leaves open the window just a bit there, Harris. It could still happen. The Kremlin's recent attack and the seizure of those Ukrainian vessels in the Sea of Azov obviously prompted leaders in Ukraine to ask for help from NATO. And that sort of made it easy for the president to simply say, I'm not going to do this right now. Now, while I have you, you mentioned, very important, that we have heard from the Russians. They say this: so far we have only seen the tweet and the media on Trump canceling the meeting. We have no official information. They go on to say, if this is so, we will have a couple of additional hours talking about President Putin that he can have for useful meetings on the sidelines of the summit. There is the very latest that we received there from the Russians. Harris?
Just put my reading glasses on to read it, too, because that was the part that kind of stuck out to me. That's that kind of shade wrapped in diplomacy, if you will. We'll just make better use of our time if that's the case. So we will wait to see the official word received. Exactly. Kevin Corke, thank you very much. Let's bring in now Republican Senator Ron Johnson, chairman of the Senate Homeland Security Committee. Great to see you today. Thank you for being on the program. I first want to just get your reaction to the idea that there was a go back and forth, if you will, over a meeting with President Putin, but what's happening with Ukraine obviously having an effect on that.
Well, hello, Harris. Listen, I'm not going to second guess the president. We are hoping that they are pressing, the administration is pressing the Putin regime behind the scenes. We have a resolution. I have close to 50 Senate co-sponsors right now that condemns the action, that calls for the immediate return and release of the prisoners and the vessels, is going to affirm Secretary Pompeo's declaration that we will never recognize the attempted annexation of Crimea, and certainly that we reaffirm our support for the Ukrainian people, its government, and its territorial integrity. So I think we need, across the board, all of our allies across government, a very strong and resolute response. I would love to see freedom of navigation operations, multinational, going through the Kerch Strait and into the Sea of Azov. We cannot tolerate this type of aggressive and provocative behavior by Vladimir Putin.
Before we move on from the Ukraine situation, what do you want to see us do next?
Well, again, I would love to see freedom of navigation operations, multinational. We have to make sure that Vladimir Putin realizes he cannot harass not Ukrainian shipping and not multinational shipping through the Kerch Strait and the Sea of Azov. It's just simply unacceptable. But I also think that we've got to beef up exercises, maybe forward troop deployments into the Baltic states, into Eastern Europe. We must meet this kind of provocative and aggressive behavior with strength and resolve.
That's what I was getting at. Are we posturing now to have more of a visible movement there, which always is a stressor. It always escalates things, but I wondered if that was your view, and you've answered it. Let's move on. About this time yesterday, you were coming out of that Senate intel briefing with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on the Khashoggi columnist killing and learning so much more about that. There was an absence there of the CIA Director, Gina Haspel. Has that been dealt with any bit today?
Not that I'm aware of. I've asked for a briefing from the CIA to figure out how they came to their conclusion, but I thought Secretary Pompeo, Secretary Mattis were quite convincing. They say there's no smoking gun. Nobody condemns the horrific murder. But the fact of the matter is the most malign force in the Middle East is Iran. I happen to believe America is a positive force, particularly our military. And as Secretary Mattis said, you can't really prove a negative, but our influence, I believe, has probably saved lives. And I think it's only American influence that can bring the rebel Houthis to the negotiating table to actually settle this and end the bloodshed. So in a world of kind of a mean, nasty, ugly world, we have to engage in real politics, and I think we have to continue to engage the Saudis as a counter to Iran and can be able to continue to exert influence over the Saudis in order to get a better resolution.
All right, you used the word condemn. No one condemns. I'm just going to think you meant condones, and we'll move on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, we certainly condemn that action.
This is what we do. I'm a journalist. I'm listening very closely. What should happen with Saudi Arabia's crown prince in terms of a meeting with our own government, our own president? Should that happen?
Well, first of all, the situation between the United States diplomatically and Saudi Arabia has changed. That horrific murder has just changed things. I'm not exactly sure what is the absolute best course of action. But again, you have to understand what the situation in the region is, the counter that Saudi Arabia does represent to Iran's malign influence. Let's face it, Iran wants to set up a Yemen form of Hezbollah, which would be not only a danger to Saudi Arabia, but also to Israel. We have Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. They are continuing to plot bomb attacks against the West. We have a smaller ISIS contingent now in Yemen as well. So we have real security interests in Yemen and in that conflict.
Well, you mentioned the AQIAP in the peninsula there. It's my understanding that we would do a set-aside. We're going to continue to work on that no matter what situation happens between us and Saudi Arabia. What's happening the latest now with the Senate's Yemen vote? What do you think that will look like, and what does it entail?
I mean, nobody can predict the outcome on that. We successfully moved on to the resolution. There's a possibility for a vote-a-rama where you can apply any non-germane amendment to it, so nobody knows where that's going to go. I'm sure leadership is working with the resolution's authors to see if we can come to a conclusion on this thing. Listen, I think every senator wants to send a very strong signal to Saudi Arabia. This is completely unacceptable behavior. But again, you have to understand the reality of the situation and deal with that reality.
Yeah, Yemen. Potentially a huge humanitarian crisis. I know it's a focus of yours on the Hill. Senator Johnson, thank you very much. Great to have your time.
Have a good day.
You too. Nancy Pelosi is celebrating after Democrats endorsed her for House Speaker yesterday. But should she be confident when it comes time for the January floor vote, given 32 of her colleagues now voted against her? Now, remember, she said, well, a few of you can vote against me. 32 was not that number. One of Pelosi's supporters in Congress will join me next.
It was so inspiring to hear my colleagues place my name in nomination once again for Speaker of the House.
Woke up in pain.
Very simply, Michael Cohen is lying, and he's trying to get a reduced sentence for things that have nothing to do with me.
That's more from President Trump outside the White House today, reacting to the news that his former attorney, Michael Cohen, has cut a new plea deal in the Mueller investigation. Cohen pleading guilty this morning to lying to Congress about a Trump Organization real estate project in Moscow. Here is Michael Cohen leaving the federal courthouse in New York City a few hours ago. Let's bring in Fox News senior judicial analyst Andrew Napolitano. So we saw from the video it happened. What happened, Judge?
Well, apparently Michael Cohen and his lawyers have been negotiating, not with Bob Mueller, but with federal prosecutors here in New York City for, as the president said, a reduced sentence in return for something. We don't know what the something is. So he pleaded guilty to lying to Senate investigators about who he saw in Moscow and what he went there for and what he said to them. The president says this is about a hotel project he was going to build, which he seriously contemplated building and on which he changed his mind, and has nothing whatsoever to do with the campaign or with his presidency. We don't know what Michael Cohen told the prosecutors in return for them agreeing to a reduced sentence. We may find that out. We may never find it out.
Judge, is the president right when he says that in the lead up to the election, he could do whatever he wanted in terms of business dealings, just like any other business person?
Yes, he's quite correct. So we really don't know what Michael Cohen told prosecutors he was in Moscow for. He was ostensibly in Moscow on a perfectly legitimate business deal, the building of Trump Tower in Moscow, which never happened.
If it's perfectly legitimate, why would he lie about... Oh, you're shaking your head. I see this.
Yeah, I mean, who knows why he would lie? He told a federal judge this morning the reason he lied was to stay on political message, whatever that means. I guess he is saying today that at the time he lied, he thought he would help the president by lying. Obviously, that is not the case.
Judge, I mean, the question of the day so far, since we've heard this, and we've heard Catherine Herridge ask it as well, is how does this materially change what has happened, any case someone would have against the president, if Cohen lied about the timing of when they were talking about this building deal that we all knew about, or he lied about the extent to which someone was going to travel, who was going to travel? Did we have in-depth discussions about possibly traveling, or did we not really talk about someone possibly traveling to do a meeting on the deal? How would that materially impact something that could be conceived as illegal?
I wish I knew. I wish I had knowledge of what Bob Mueller and the prosecutors here in New York City have, Melissa, but obviously we don't. But typically, when a person is given a very good deal, and the president is right, he got a serious reduction in exposure to jail time, it's for what they have already told the prosecutors. We don't know what he's already told the prosecutors. But I will tell you this, the easiest charge for the government to prove is conspiracy, because conspiracy is an agreement to do something wrong, even if the something wrong never happened. So was Michael Cohen's trip to Moscow part of some agreement or series of agreements to do something wrong for the campaign? I mean, if that's the case, then we would have to hear or see what Michael Cohen told the prosecutors. Whatever it was enough to get them to ask a judge to lower his jail time exposure considerably.
All right, Anton Seawright is on fire to ask a question right now. Anton?
Judge, do you really think that at this point in the investigation that somehow or another the special prosecutor is going in the wrong direction? Because that seems to be the temperature from the right. We need to shut this down. This has nothing to do with anything. Do you really think he's going in the wrong direction at the rate he's going?
Not at this stage of the game, Antoine. I happen to agree with you,
Thank you, sir.
On that. I will also say, and I understand the impatience that a lot of my friends and colleagues have been expected, but having been involved in these cases, not obviously one involving the president, prosecutors don't always get evidence in an orderly fashion, and they don't always get evidence from credible people. Michael Cohen, the president's right, is not a credible person. He has twice pleaded guilty to crimes of deception, bank fraud, and lying to congressional investigators.
Judge, it's Kennedy. That was my question I have for you. How does special counsel decide what aspects of Michael Cohen's story to believe, or any of these witnesses, when they know that they have lied?
Great question. When they can corroborate what he told them. Just like they're using what Paul Manafort...
They can corroborate the lies?
corroborate whatever he told them in return for the reduced sentence. Just as Paul Manafort gave them some information, we don't know what, but they'd never put him on the stand because he's an inveterate liar. They will use whatever Manafort told them and whatever Cohen told them that they're able to corroborate through other witnesses or forensic evidence like emails or phone calls or text messages.
But Judge, is any of that information usable if Michael Cohen's a liar and not credible?
If you back it up, it is.
My suggestion is that what the prosecutors are trying to prove is a conspiracy. And a conspiracy is a series of agreements. Now, series of agreements means a number of jigsaw puzzles. I'm going to guess that Michael Cohen gave them a few pieces in one of the jigsaw puzzles, and he gave it to them before this morning, or they wouldn't have entered that agreement.
Okay.
What those pieces were, we don't know, and we may not know, Lisa, until this stuff is laid out by Bob Mueller.
All right. Thank you. President Trump saying he's not taking the possibility of a pardon from his former campaign chair, Paul Manafort, off the table. Manafort's been convicted of multiple counts of financial fraud in connection with his work as a political consultant in Ukraine. The president talked about Manafort this morning as he left the White House for a G20 summit. Watch.
It's very sad what's happened to Paul, the way he's being treated. I've never seen anybody treated so poorly. I said, no, I have not offered any pardons. And I think they asked, or whatever, would you? I said, I'm not taking anything off the table.
The Wall Street Journal reports that Manafort lied to investigators about his personal financial dealings with Ukraine, resulting in special counsel Robert Mueller revoking Manafort's plea deal. In the meantime, conservative author Jerome Corsi, an associate of Trump ally Roger Stone, has ceased cooperating with Mueller and now claims Mueller's investigators pressured him to lie. Corsi has asked his legal team to bring a criminal complaint against Mueller and the Justice Department. Lisa, that's a very interesting wrinkle.
Well, yeah, and I've said this yesterday, but I think that seems rather consistent with the Michael Flynn situation as well, where congressional investigators, according to what the FBI told them, believe that Michael Flynn didn't lie, and then as soon as Robert Mueller took over, he pled guilty to lying. So that raises questions to me and the tactics of Mueller regarding any sort of pardon for Manafort. I absolutely think that would be the wrong decision to make. Clearly, Manafort has violated the law and has done so for quite some time. I question why the FBI never relayed that information to President Trump, considering the fact that they had sat down with him, I believe, in 2013 as well as 2014. You think that would be pertinent information, particularly when they told Dianne Feinstein that he was employing a Chinese spy.
Kennedy?
She certainly does have some colorful practices, which I really appreciate. It's interesting because Corsi is now a public thorn in Mueller's side. He's giving a lot of this information to the press, which, you know, it really isn't leaking because it's so overt and transparent, which is fascinating. And it's got to be really frustrating for Mueller. And, you know, at the same time, we're getting bits of information from Mueller's side because there's some division within that camp of how to proceed with some of the president's answers. And you know, we're seeing in the press some of the answers to the answers in writing the president has given to special counsel. So, you know, the whole thing is now so odd. And there are so many personalities that are connected in the strangest ways that you just sit here every day and you can't. It's like a crazy spy novel. You don't know how it is going to end up or how it's going to test the future limits of special counsels.
The good news about all of this is that we have to be patient and wait. And the Mueller team has done.
That's not good news.
No,
I don't like being patient. How's that good news?
I think it's all good news.
No one's being patient. Everyone is already reading the tea leaves and giving their final conclusion.
The even better news is that there have been almost zero leaks about what's going on in the camp. The thing I'm hopeful about, particularly in this
Where those answers come from?
The thing I'm hopeful about, particularly the next Congress, is that we put bipartisan legislation or measures in place to protect the special prosecutor, the work he's done, so that he can finish his work. And at the end of the day, if it all pans out, whether Trump is innocent, Trump is guilty, whatever pans out, then I think we've done our job and the special prosecutor's done his job. Well, that's what 70% of the American people want.
All right. I know we got to go.
All right. President Trump says if Democrats make good on their threats to launch investigations of his administration, he will punch back by declassifying documents on the Russia probe. Smart political move, disturbing threat? We'll debate.
Welcome back. President Trump reportedly threatening to declassify FISA warrant applications and other documents from the Mueller probe if House Democrats launch investigations against him and his administration when they take control of the House next year. The president telling the New York Post, if they go down the presidential harassment track, if they want to go and harass the president and the administration, I think that would be the best thing that would happen to me. I'm a counterpuncher, and I will hit them so hard they've never been hit like that. This news comes 2 months after a group of Trump allies in the House called on the president to declassify Justice Department documents that they believe would undercut the Russia probe. Those documents include DOJ officials' requests to surveil the Trump campaign advisor Carter Page and memos on DOJ official Bruce Orr's interactions with Christopher Steele, the author of the controversial Trump dossier. Kenny, I'm going to start with you. So we know with recent documents that Congress had obtained with Bruce Orr that Christopher Steele was worried about Comey's firing. He was worried that they were going to be exposed. So is President Trump keeping these documents as leverage against an incoming Democrat-controlled House?
Yes, and that part I disagree with. I don't think they should be used as a form of political extortion. I think that we should get in the habit of releasing these things and getting to peer into the process of FISA application warrant applications. I think that's really critical, and there's so much that we don't know and so much that is left up to the imagination, which leads to all sorts of conspiracy theories and conjecture and demagoguery on both sides. And it also adds to this already toxic environment. We have to come up with a better process. And there are so many outstanding questions because as Adam Schiff talks about conflicts of interest and appearance of, Russian collusion, you could apply those exact same words to the gathering of the dossier and who Christopher Steele might have spoken to at the behest of a political campaign and a national political committee.
Antoine, do you think that this will deter Democrats in their investigations at all?
No, and the president is behaving very immature, and he's conducting himself like a paper tiger in this regard. Look, the Congress has a responsibility, the legislative branch has a responsibility to be a check, to perform checks and balances.
Isn't that what Congress is doing right now?
This Congress did not do that with this president.
No, but the FISA warrants and the FBI
controlled by the Republicans. This Congress did not do that. But here's my message to my Democratic friends in Congress. Do not spend all of your time slowing down the Congress with investigation after investigations. Be strategic and be mindful in the thought. Instead, focus on legislation. Do the things that got them to the majority, and don't get caught up in this narrative of back and forth with Trump. But also make sure you hold him accountable along the way.
Well, it'll be interesting to see if they can, excuse me, Lisa, do that. Eric Swalwell of California told me yesterday that they're going to investigate and legislate, and that he thinks that they can do both. And, walk and talk. I know it is the mantra of the Democrat, walk and talk. But you finally have part of the leadership in Washington back. Is that really where you want to put your powder?
Well, Harris, there's an old song that I love to sing sometimes that says, it takes two to make the thing go right. And so therefore I think they can do both.
This probably won't surprise you. I like to lead when I dance.
I think they can do both. I think they can investigate and legislate.
I don't think so.
But I think it's going to, the investigation part has to be strategic. And I don't think they can just investigate day after day, time after time.
You're going to need a bullhorn to tell your friends that.
But Melissa, to Antoine, hold on. But Melissa, to Antoine's point, so you've got a lot of Democrats now that are gearing up to launch investigation after investigation. These same people have been critical of Republicans in the Oversight Committee doing their job of oversight into things like the FISA warrant against Carter Page and into the FBI's action. So what do you make of that?
I think it's interesting that the left has the same suspicion and frustration about Paul Manafort and Papadopoulos and all of these meetings that the right has frustration and suspicion about the dossier. And it's ironic that both sides don't see that they're both, angry and frustrated and curious and maybe fearful about basically the same thing. When Trump talks about declassifying and others say sources and methods, it's the same people that call for him to just go testify and tell the truth and hang everything out there. I don't know how you solve any of it, but people need to start looking in the mirror.
When you solve it, but when you solve it by transparency and President Trump just getting all this information out in the open.
but no one wants to apply the golden rule.
What's the golden rule?
Exactly. Yeah, do unto others as you would have others.
Oh my God! How did I not know that?
That's the killing rule.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
I thought the golden rule was shop with coupon.
No.
But the point is, if you don't like the idea that a president could use surveillance power and shady FISA warrants and the investigatory powers of the DOJ and the FBI against a political opponent that you're aligned with, you shouldn't like it when your side does it to the other side. It's not okay. That whole aspect of government has gotten so big and so mysterious and so opaque, and we have to shrink it and make it clear, like the bikini I wore on prom night.
I don't know who all these Democrats are that you speak of that are going to do investigations. The Democrats I know are going to run
Schiff, Cummings, Swalwell. I mean,
Lisa, they have to do their job. But also I heard Democrats talk about.
All right, we've got to go in.
You Southern girl.
All right, well.
Oh my goodness gracious.
All right, well, she's confident, but Nancy Pelosi still faces a big hurdle in her quest to become Speaker. Whether the wily veteran lawmaker can pull off the deal and reclaim the Speaker's gavel. That's next.
Let me tell you something. I'm talking about scores of members of Congress who just gave me a vote, are giving me a vote of confidence. That is where our focus is. Are there dissenters? Yes, but I expect to have a powerful vote as we go forward. Strength, but our unity is our power, and we will use that power again in a unifying way for our country. I'm very proud. We look forward to the results, whatever they are. They will be intense, and they will be a vote of confidence to send me my name to the floor, that I'm proud to be the nominee of the House Democratic Caucus, once again for Speaker of the House.
Oh, she's just a peach. A little bruised, but that's okay. Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi declaring a big victory for her party after a majority of House Democrats buckled to pick her as Speaker. 203 Democrats voted for her, but 32 voted no. Congresswoman Pelosi needs to win over more than a dozen of those non-votes to win the speakership when the full House votes in January. So, Antoine, we've spoken about this many times. I don't think she's a shoo-in. I mean, right now she wouldn't have the votes if it were held on the floor. And if some other ornery members gain a little confidence, they could block that. And then your friend Jim Clyburn would be Speaker of the House, perhaps rightly so.
There's a lesson in all of this for everyone who do not know Nancy Pelosi. When you count her out, she will always teach you do not know how to count. And that's proof in the pudding. She received more votes in the caucus yesterday than Paul Ryan did in his caucus not too long ago when he was nominated.
Yeah, he's another gem.
That's
why people don't like Congress.
When it's all said and done, she will be Speaker. She will make history once again. But I think you will see a different posture and tone from Nancy Pelosi that you've never seen before. Because
really? Like what? Like what? Yeah, tell us.
I know I'm outnumbered, but at least let me get my thought out.
Yeah, tell us.
I think you will see a Nancy Pelosi shift from campaign Nancy to governing Nancy to keep the majority. Because as I said on this program, particularly on your show, it's one thing to get to the majority, it's another thing to keep the majority. And I think she has the obligation to those new members who won the swing districts and not do anything to muff it up.
But she did a pretty good job of muffing it up, so you speak, in 2010 when Republicans took back the House with 63 netted 63 seats. We also saw historical losses under Nancy Pelosi. And I think what's going to be really interesting, and what I'm getting the popcorn out and looking forward to watching, is Nancy Pelosi trying to wrangle her caucus. Not only is she going to have problems with these more moderate members who signed the letter saying they're not going to support her, but she's also going to have problems with this growing progressive caucus. So I'm going to sit back, I'm going to enjoy the show, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Can I jump in here for 1 second? You and I have been talking about this, and so let's just be open.
And y'all kept me out of the conversation.
You can't be in every conversation. Good Lord. She opened that cookie jar up, and she started giving out the cookies. And when she got confident enough in the last 24 hours, and then it was reported publicly, that she was willing to let some of her members who were in jeopardy maybe for the next time around vote against her so they can say, see, I told you I was going to vote against Nancy Pelosi, and I did. It doesn't chap her hide at all to let a few people say no. What she cannot stand for is anybody running against her.
Right.
So as I've had it explained to me by Democrat members of the House and Senate, they're going to watch a situation in the House where they can either vote for Nancy Pelosi or vote for a Republican. Like they're never going to be in a position where they have to make a binary choice within the party. That's what we call in the South, because I'm from the South too, cheating.
Oh,
okay. Wow. That means you're going to stack the deck.
If you get caught.
And that means your party. Well, they did get caught.
No.
So, as you go forward, where does that leave the younger members of the party? And Antoine, being under whatever age
we're running out of time. I want to bring Melissa in here. You got 10 seconds.
Don't you care about that?
I do care. What I care about is maintaining the majority. And I think what you're going to see from this Congress, particularly Democrats, is a robust policy agenda that will get them reelected.
Speaking of robust, we have more Outnumbered in just a moment.
I'm ready.